Some nights look perfect on the outside. The lights are bright. The champagne is cold. The crowd is dressed in their finest, laughing and celebrating like nothing in the world could go wrong. But somewhere behind the music, behind the smiles and the clinking glasses, there is always a truth hiding in plain sight. A truth that waits. Patient. Quiet. Until the exact moment it cannot be ignored anymore. This is the story of one such night. A billionaire stands at the center of his own engagement party, surrounded by politicians and CEOs, by the daughter of a governor on his arm, and he feels nothing. Not because he is ungrateful. Not because he is cold. But because across the crowded ballroom, in a simple white staff uniform, with her hair pulled back and her belly heavily swollen with pregnancy, a woman he once loved more than anything in this world is quietly wiping down tables. His ex-wife. And she doesn't know he's watching. Neither of them could have predicted this moment. Neither of them could have imagined that the choices made in that tiny apartment, during the hardest years of their lives, would lead them back to the same room, on the same night, with a secret between them powerful enough to change everything. Stay with us. Because by the time this story ends, you will understand something about sacrifice, about love, and about the kind of loyalty that never truly disappears, no matter how many years and tears stand between two people. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now you might be asking yourself, how does a man become a billionaire and not know his own ex-wife is carrying his child? How does a woman spend 8 months struggling alone, pregnant, exhausted, working small jobs, when the father of her baby has become one of the most successful men in the country? And what does it say about two people who once loved each other so deeply they gave up everything, that they ended up in the same room again, on the very night the world was watching? These questions are not simple. And the answers will not make you comfortable. Because this is not a story about a hero and a villain. This is a story about two good people who made painful choices, and the consequences that followed them quietly, like shadows, until they could no longer be outrun. We will walk you through every part of it. The love. The sacrifice. The silence. The confrontation. And finally, the truth. So find yourself a comfortable seat. Let this story breathe. And watch what happens when karma, patient and unerring, finally arrives right on time. His name was Andre Collins. Most people called him by a nickname that had followed him since childhood, Dre. A name that carried the warmth of someone who, despite everything, still felt deeply. At 32, Andre had become what the business world calls a phenomenon. His technology company, built from nothing, funded through rejection after rejection, running on sheer will and very little sleep, had exploded into one of the fastest-growing startups in the country in under a year. Investors who had laughed at him 2 years earlier were now sending him messages, calling his office, trying to find a way into his story. The media called him one of the most promising entrepreneurs of his generation. His parents, who had once cut him off without a second thought, now greeted him at family gatherings with wide smiles and proud introductions. And tonight, at the Grand Imperial Hotel, the most powerful people in the city had come together to celebrate his engagement to Brittany Ease, the daughter of the state governor. It was, by every measure, a perfect night. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like constellations pulled indoors. The marble floors reflected the warm glow of wall lamps wrapped in gold. White roses dressed every table. A jazz band played softly near the dance floor while waiters glided between guests carrying trays of champagne and fine wine. Politicians shook hands in corners. CEOs traded compliments near the bar. Cameras flashed as journalists captured the elegance of the room. And at the center of it all, Andre stood in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, holding a glass of champagne he hadn't touched. His posture was straight. His presence was commanding. But his eyes were somewhere else entirely. Brittany stood beside him. She was beautiful in a way that photographs never fully captured, tall and elegant in a silver evening gown, diamond earrings catching the chandelier light, her smile never fading as she moved from guest to guest with practiced grace. She was everything his parents had always wanted for him. Smart. Powerful. Polished. She leaned close and touched his arm gently. "You look so serious," she said with a soft laugh. "Tonight is supposed to be the happiest night of our lives." Andre forced a small smile. "Yes, of course." But his voice was flat. Empty. Like a line read from a script he had never truly believed in. Brittany didn't notice. She turned away to greet another group of arrivals, her charm lighting up the room the way it always did. Andre took a quiet breath and looked out across the ballroom. Something about all of this felt wrong. Not wrong in the way people mean when they say a night went poorly. Wrong in a deeper way. Like wearing someone else's clothes. Like living inside someone else's story and not knowing how to find the exit. He had felt this way for months. But he had learned to ignore it. Success had a way of filling the empty spaces, at least enough to get through the day. But tonight, standing in this room full of people celebrating his future, the emptiness was louder than usual. He loosened his tie slightly and stepped back from the crowd. And that's when his eyes found her. Near the far end of the ballroom, a woman in a white staff shirt and black apron moved quietly between the tables. She was wiping surfaces, collecting empty glasses, keeping her head down, the kind of worker most guests wouldn't notice for even half a second. But Andre noticed. He noticed the way she moved. Careful. Deliberate. Familiar. He leaned forward slightly. Stared harder. She turned sideways. And the champagne glass nearly slipped from his hand. Because he knew that face. He had held that face in his hands during the worst nights of his life and told it everything was going to be okay. He had woken up beside that face more mornings than he could count in that small apartment with the leaking roof, when they were both 20-something and broke and somehow still laughing. Aaliyah. His ex-wife. The noise of the party fell away completely. Every sound, the music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, dissolved into silence. Aaliyah moved steadily between the tables, unaware that someone across the room had just stopped breathing. And then Andre saw it. Her stomach. Large. Round. Heavily pregnant. His chest contracted so hard he thought for a moment he might be ill. 8 months. She had left 8 months ago. No warning. No phone call. Just a short letter on the kitchen table that said 7 words, "You deserve a better life than this." And now here she was. Cleaning tables at his engagement party. Pregnant. The mind does strange things in moments of shock. It does not process things in order. It does not line up the facts neatly and walk you through them one by one. Instead, it drops you into a torrent, questions, memories, calculations, fears, all at once, crashing over you before you can even find steady ground. Was she married? Was the baby someone else's? Were they together? Was he happy? And then, quietly, almost gently, the most frightening question of all surfaced from somewhere deep inside his chest. What if the baby is mine? Andre's grip tightened around the champagne glass. He thought about the timeline. 8 months. If she had left while already pregnant, if she had left without knowing, or worse, if she had known and chosen not to tell him. He took a step forward. Then another. Dre. He stopped. Brittany stood beside him. Her brows were slightly furrowed. "You've been staring at that corner for almost 5 minutes," she said. He said nothing. Brittany followed his gaze across the room. Her eyes swept slowly until they landed on Aaliyah. For just a moment, her expression was unreadable. Then recognition flickered across her face. Her eyes hardened immediately. "Oh," she said softly. "That's her." Andre said nothing. Brittany studied the woman across the room more carefully. Then her gaze dropped to Aaliyah's stomach. And something shifted in Brittany's expression, not softness, but a kind of cold amusement layered over something that might have been fear. "So," Brittany said, her voice dropping to a murmur. "Your ex-wife decided to attend our engagement party." "She works here," Andre said quietly. Brittany laughed, short and hollow. "Well, well." She glanced toward him. "Your ex-wife cleaning tables at your engagement party while pregnant with someone else's child." She shook her head. "How embarrassing." Andre didn't respond. But his eyes were still on Aaliyah. Brittany noticed. The amusement faded. "You're not still thinking about her, are you?" He didn't answer. And for Brittany Ease, a woman who had never lost anything she believed belonged to her, that silence was not acceptable. Without another word, she turned and began walking across the ballroom. Fast. Direct. Like someone who had made a decision and intended to follow through before anyone could stop her. Brittany, Andre said. She didn't stop. Nearby guests began to turn. A few paused their conversations. Something about the governor's daughter marching through the ballroom with that expression on her face caught people's attention before anyone understood why. Across the room, Aaliyah looked up just in time. She saw Brittany coming. And she froze. Now here is something you need to understand about Aaliyah. She was not a weak woman. She had never been a weak woman. What she was quiet. Thoughtful. The kind of person who absorbed the weight of the world without making a sound about it, who loved so deeply she was willing to disappear rather than become someone's burden. That kind of strength is harder to see. But it is the realest kind. And on this night, in this ballroom, she would need every ounce of it. Because the confrontation that was walking toward her had nothing to do with justice and everything to do with pride. If this story has your attention right now, drop a comment below and say, "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly with us all the way to the end. Brittany stopped directly in front of her. For a moment, the two women simply looked at each other. The contrast between them was impossible to ignore, Brittany in her silver gown and diamond earrings, the light catching every expensive detail of her appearance. Aaliyah in her white staff shirt, her apron slightly wrinkled from hours of work, her hand resting instinctively on the curve of her belly. Brittany's eyes traveled slowly from Aaliyah's face down to her stomach, and then back up again. She smiled. But there was nothing warm about it. "Well," Brittany said, in a voice pitched just loud enough for nearby guests to catch pieces of it. "This is unexpected." Aaliyah lowered her gaze slightly. "I'm just doing my job." "Of course you are," Brittany said. She looked around the ballroom with an air of theatrical disbelief. "Cleaning tables at your ex-husband's engagement party." Her smile sharpened. "How humiliating." "I didn't know about the event until I arrived," Aaliyah said calmly. Brittany raised an eyebrow. "Please." Several guests nearby had gone quiet. A few were watching openly now, sensing the tension without fully understanding it. Aaliyah kept her composure. She had been humiliated before. She had survived it before. She could survive it again. But Brittany wasn't finished. She stepped closer, lowering her voice just slightly, making it more intimate and more cutting at the same time. "Let me guess," she said. "You left him when he had nothing. Then you saw what he became. And now you show up here." Her eyes dropped again to Aaliyah's stomach, "carrying someone else's baby, hoping what exactly? That he would feel sorry for you?" Aaliyah's jaw tightened. "That's not true." "Then whose baby is that?" Brittany asked. The question hung in the air like a held breath. Aaliyah said nothing. Brittany laughed, low, satisfied. "Oh my. You don't even know the father." The words were designed to wound. And they did. Not because they were true, but because they were said loudly enough for the wrong people to hear. Aaliyah placed both hands over her stomach. A small, protective gesture. Instinctive. The kind of thing a mother does without thinking. Then a voice from behind Brittany said, "That's enough." Brittany turned around. Andre had arrived. He stood there with his jaw set and his eyes calm, the particular calm of someone who is holding something much larger underneath the surface. Nearby guests shifted. The jazz band was still playing, but the music felt very far away. Brittany crossed her arms. "Oh, good. You're here." She gestured toward Aaliyah. "Your ex-wife decided to attend our engagement party." Andre's eyes met Aaliyah's briefly. Something passed between them, an entire conversation compressed into 1 second, before Aaliyah looked away. "She works here," Andre said. "Yes, I can see that," Brittany replied. She stepped closer to him and dropped her voice. "Don't you find it strange? She shows up pregnant at your engagement party, and you think that's normal?" Andre looked at Aaliyah again. Brittany noticed. Her expression darkened. "Don't tell me you're actually feeling sorry for her." He didn't answer. Brittany turned back to Aaliyah, her patience dissolving into something colder. "You know what I think," she said. "I think you came here hoping he would see you. I think you thought if you showed up looking miserable and pregnant, he would feel guilty." She stepped closer. "You humiliated him when you abandoned him. You left when he had nothing. You didn't believe in him." Aaliyah's voice was steady, but the pain in it was real. That's not why I left. Sure it isn't. Brittany gestured toward Aaliyah's stomach again. And now you show up pregnant with someone else's child. She leaned in slightly. Do yourself a favor. Finish cleaning the tables, and leave. The silence that followed was complete. Aaliyah stood still for one long moment. Then quietly, without argument, without scene, she picked up her tray and turned to walk toward the service area. Brittany watched her go with a look of satisfaction. But Andre wasn't watching Brittany. He was watching Aaliyah. And he noticed the way she walked, slightly slower than he remembered. One hand pressed gently against her lower back. The posture of someone who has been standing for far too many hours. Someone who is exhausted in a way that goes beyond tired. Brittany touched his arm. Don't tell me you're still worried about her. He pulled his gaze away. Aaliyah has been working this kind of shift for months, he said quietly, almost to himself. Alone. Brittany frowned. What does that have to do with anything? But Andre was already moving. Walking away from her. Walking toward the service corridor. Walking toward the woman who had left him 8 months ago with 7 words and a question he had never been able to answer. Brittany stood in the middle of the ballroom, staring after him in disbelief. And the jealousy in her chest, the kind that comes not from love but from possession, began to harden into something else. Something dangerous. The service corridor behind the ballroom was quiet. The sounds of the party were muffled here, filtered through thick doors into something distant and almost dreamlike. Aaliyah stood at the stainless steel counter, both hands gripping the edge, trying to steady her breathing. When the door opened, she didn't have to look to know who it was. She could feel him the way you feel weather changing before it arrives. Your fiancé is probably looking for you, she said softly, without turning. He walked closer. Stopped a few feet in front of her. Silence filled the corridor. Then, Aaliyah. Hearing her name in his voice after 8 months was like being handed something you thought was gone forever, a specific kind of warmth and a specific kind of ache, both at once. She looked up. Their eyes met. The question came quietly. But it carried the weight of every sleepless night between them. Who is the father? Aaliyah held his gaze. 8 months of silence stood between them. 8 months of misunderstanding, of pain, of choices made in the dark. She took a slow breath. You are. The word seemed to reach him slowly, like sound traveling across water. He blinked. You. Yes. Andre ran a hand through his hair. His eyes dropped to her stomach. His daughter. The child she was carrying was his daughter. The room felt like it had tilted slightly on its axis. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Aaliyah's fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. I didn't know when I left, she said quietly. I found out a few weeks later. Then why? Because by then, everything had changed. She looked at him steadily. I saw the news about your company. The investment. The articles. You were finally building the life you were always capable of. A small, sad smile crossed her lips. I wasn't surprised. You always had that in you. That doesn't explain why you disappeared. I left because I was killing you, she said. Her voice was very quiet. Very honest. Your parents cut you off because of me. Your friends left because of me. Every door that closed, every investor who said no, I was part of the reason. I watched you get smaller every day, Dre. More exhausted. More defeated. And I knew, that I was the weight around your neck. Andre shook his head. You were the only thing keeping me going. Aaliyah's eyes filled. That's what you thought. But I could see what it was costing you. So you made the decision for me. I thought I was freeing you. You broke my heart. The words came out before he could stop them. And the moment they left his mouth, the room felt smaller. Aaliyah closed her eyes briefly. I know. When she opened them again, there were tears on her cheeks. But her voice didn't waver. I thought if I stayed, you would eventually start to resent me. And I couldn't survive watching you look at me that way. Andre stared at her for a long time. He thought about the months after she left. The searching, calling everyone he knew, driving past the bookstore, knocking on doors. The silence that met him every time. The grief of it. And then slowly, the decision to bury it. To let the company become everything. To agree to the engagement because it was easier than feeling. You went through all of this alone, he said at last. I managed. You shouldn't have had to. She didn't argue. The baby kicked, a small, strong movement visible even through the fabric of her uniform. Aaliyah gasped softly and placed both hands over her belly. Andre's eyes went wide. Are you okay? She moves a lot. Aaliyah smiled faintly. The doctor thinks it's a girl. Something shifted in Andre's chest. A word formed in his mind, daughter, and it felt like discovering a room in yourself you hadn't known existed. A girl, he said softly. Aaliyah nodded. He reached out slowly. Hesitated. Then gently placed his palm against her stomach. The baby kicked again. His eyes widened. A smile appeared on his face, slow, wondering, completely unguarded. The smile of someone who has just been given something they didn't know they needed. Hello, he whispered. Aaliyah watched him quietly. The tears she had been holding back slipped silently down her face. For a moment, they were not the billionaire and the hotel worker. They were not the abandoned husband and the woman who left. They were not the past or the conflict or the hurt. They were just two people standing in a quiet room, listening to the same heartbeat. Andre looked up. You're coming with me, he said. Aaliyah blinked. What? You're not doing this alone anymore. Dre. You're carrying my child. You've been working double shifts while pregnant. That ends tonight. Your fiancé. I'll deal with Brittany. Aaliyah looked at him carefully. She recognized that expression. Steady. Decided. The same expression he'd worn the day he told his parents he was choosing her. The same expression he'd worn when he filed the paperwork for the company that everyone said would fail. Are you sure? She asked. Yes. Neither of them noticed the shadow that had gone still just outside the slightly open corridor door. Brittany stood in the hallway. Face pale. Fists clenched. She had heard everything. What happened in the hours that followed moved fast, the way things always move fast when truth has finally been said out loud. Andre brought Aaliyah to his mansion that night. She fell asleep almost as soon as she lay down, the deep, exhausted sleep of someone who had been carrying too much for too long. He sat alone in his office for hours, looking at the city. He thought about the photograph on his desk, the two of them laughing at a small restaurant near the beach, her head against his shoulder, both of them happy in a way that money had not made him since. He thought about what it meant that in the worst year of his life, she had been his only steady thing. And in the best year, the year of success, of recognition, of power, he had been completely alone. Success, he realized, is hollow when you cannot share it with the person who believed in you when there was nothing to believe in. The morning came with sunlight and trouble. Brittany arrived before breakfast. She did not knock. She walked through the front gate the way someone walks through a door they believe belongs to them. You brought her here, she said, standing in the living room, her eyes cold. Yes, Andre said. You left our engagement party for your pregnant ex-wife. I left because I had to. Brittany's voice rose. You humiliated me in front of everyone in that room. Brittany. You're choosing her. It was not a question. He met her gaze. I'm choosing my daughter. Brittany stared at him. Then she looked up, and saw Aaliyah standing at the top of the staircase. What followed was ugly. Accusations fired from every angle. Brittany's voice echoing through the marble hallways, grief and fury mixed together in ways even she may not have fully understood. She had not come just because of pride, though pride was part of it. She had come because she had watched the man she intended to marry look across a ballroom and feel something she had never once made him feel. And that was the real wound. Aaliyah descended the stairs slowly. She did not argue. She did not fight. She answered what she could answer and stayed quiet when silence was the better choice. But Brittany had not come to listen. And in one terrible moment, a moment that would stay with everyone in that room for the rest of their lives, Brittany shoved her. It was not a light push. Aaliyah stumbled. Her foot slipped on the polished marble floor. She fell hard. The sound echoed through the mansion. Aaliyah. Andre crossed the room in seconds. Aaliyah lay on the floor, both hands pressed over her stomach, her breathing already uneven. And then she said the words that turned everything cold, "My water." It broke. What happened next moved in flashes. Andre lifting her. The car. The driver pushing through traffic. Aaliyah gripping his hand so hard the bones ached. The hospital's bright corridors. The doors closing between them for what felt like forever. And then, after an eternity of waiting, a cry. Small. Sharp. Perfect. Andre was allowed in. Aaliyah lay against the hospital bed, pale and exhausted and beautiful in the way someone looks when they have just survived something immense. In her arms, wrapped in a pink blanket, was a tiny girl. The nurse placed the baby carefully into Andre's arms. He had faced boardrooms full of people who wanted him to fail. He had rebuilt his life from zero with his bare hands. He had made decisions that others said were impossible and proved them wrong. But nothing, had prepared him for the feeling of his daughter's fingers curling around his. Her tiny hand. His giant one. And the absolute certainty that this moment was the most important thing that had ever happened to him. He looked at Aaliyah. Aaliyah looked at him. "She's beautiful," he said. His voice barely above a whisper. "She is," Aaliyah agreed. They named her Layla. And in the quiet of that hospital room, with the morning light coming through the window and their daughter sleeping between them, Andre reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Aaliyah's breath caught. "You kept it," she whispered. It was the ring. The same one he had given her when they were young and broke and completely certain of each other. He had never thrown it away. "I could never explain why," he said. "Until tonight." He took her hand. He looked at her, really looked at her, the way he had looked at her in that bookstore more than 2 years ago, the first time he understood that some people change everything. "I know we hurt each other," he said. "I know we made choices that cost us both more than we knew. But I also know that the best version of myself only ever existed when I was with you." Aaliyah's tears came quietly. "We've already lost enough time," he said. "I don't want to lose any more." He opened the box. "Aaliyah. Will you marry me again?" The room was completely still. She looked at the ring. Then at him. Then at the tiny sleeping face of their daughter. And she nodded. Yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger. And for the first time in 8 months, something in both of them came back to life, quietly, steadily, the way dawn arrives. Not with noise, but with light. "We're starting over," Aaliyah said softly. Andre shook his head. "No," he said. He kissed her forehead gently. "We're continuing." Later, much later, when the story had settled and people were no longer talking about the engagement party or the confrontation or the night a billionaire left his own celebration to carry his pregnant ex-wife to the hospital, the truth was simple. Sacrifice done from love is never wasted. It may be misunderstood. It may cost the person who makes it far more than they expected. It may arrive at the wrong time and leave scars that take years to explain. But love that is real, love that persists through poverty and silence and separation and pride, does not disappear. It waits. Patient as rain on stone. Certain as sunrise after the longest night. Aaliyah had left because she loved him. Andre had never stopped. And Layla, their daughter, their beginning, was proof that sometimes the universe holds a story together even when the people inside it have lost the thread. Not every ending that looks like a loss is one. Some are simply intermissions. Some are the universe saying, "Not yet. Not like this. There is something better waiting, but only if you are brave enough to walk through the difficulty that precedes it." Andre and Aaliyah walked through it. And what waited on the other side was not just each other. It was the family they had always been meant to build. Before we close tonight's story, we want to ask you something. Aaliyah left not because she stopped loving Andre, but because she loved him so completely she was willing to disappear from his life to protect him. Have you ever loved someone that deeply? Have you ever sacrificed something that cost you everything, not because you wanted to, but because you believed it was the right thing to do? And here is the harder question, was it? Or is that the kind of sacrifice that, in the end, only causes more pain, for both the person who gives it and the person who receives it without knowing? We would love to know what you think. Drop it in the comments below. This community is full of people with wisdom and real-life experience, and conversations like this are why we do what we do. Now if you've made it all the way to the end of this story, we see you. Thank you for being here. Not just for the views, but for the heart you bring to these stories. We believe storytelling is one of the oldest forms of healing. And if something in Andre and Aaliyah's journey touched something in you tonight, hold that. Reflect on it. Because the best stories are not just the ones we watch. They are the ones that watch us back. Our next story is coming very soon. And we can promise you this, it will not leave you the way it found you. Subscribe to Karma's Edge Stories so you are with us when it arrives. And until then, remember this. Karma does not rush. Karma does not forget. And love, real love, never truly ends. It just waits for the right moment to begin again.